Afternoon, everybody. Up to the ICB meeting public. For those of you who are at the AGM, my name is Ian Green. I'm the recently appointed chair of the ICB, and this is my first meeting as the chair. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on the website after the meeting. There are no fire alarms. In fact, the emergency exits enough mobile phones. We have a number of apologies for absence, and they are from Dr. Vicky Torres, R. and Dave Bennett as members, and then we've received apologies from Harry Turner, Helen Onions, Alison Smith, and Claire Cole. Any other apologies? Thank you very much. Then moving on then to declarations of interest. Are there declarations of interest everyone needs to make? Items on this agenda have not already been declared. No, if anyone becomes aware of a declaration of interest, you go through the agenda, then please do declare your interest at that time. We now move on then to the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of June and the 30th of July. 25th of June, first of all. Any issues in terms of accuracy? We're happy then to approve those as a short. Yeah, thank you very much. They're approved. Then on the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of July, in terms of issues in terms of accuracy. Therefore, they are also approved. Matters arising. There are a number of matters arising contained within this. Just on the first one, I mean, ICB 2603, about the fresh employment forward plan and an update to give us a meeting. Do you have any indication when that might be? So, just to help. The joint forward plan, has been annual plan for the last couple of years, and that's been a objective. Normally, we get planning guidance alongside the joint forward plan. We refresh that for about November, December time through to the end of the year. What we have had this year, though, alongside the 10-year plan, and as Simon will talk about, is an invitation with planning guidance to develop a medium-term plan now. So I think a number of us are querying whether we're also going to be required to do a joint forward plan. A number of the priorities and the themes and work streams we have in our existing joint forward plan are being built into this. So I think it's going to get overtaken by this. So it may well be it's actually no longer necessary. Let's keep it open for now, and then to review this at our next meeting. I decide to keep it open or to say to you it's been taken over by them. Correct. But as a citizen and as better partners, we're working. Then the next item in terms of dementia MDT rolled out as complete. We've then got the winter delivery plan that's on the agenda today. Residents' experience around frailty, again, that action is complete. The item in relation to the board development session around risk stratification has taken place. And I believe there's a conversation which is taking place with Dr. Paul.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
so that action can be closed. And then integrated care system performance report, that's closed. So those items are closed. So just that one item remains open. Anything else in terms of actions that haven't been captured in the actions log in the full set of minutes? Great, thank you very much. Then let's move on to questions from members of the public. We have received 14 questions from members of the public, and they'll be processed in line with our procedure. That means that questions will be answered and then will be made publicly available. But just to let people know that's the case. We do have down now residents' experience. I'm not quite sure whether that's colleagues are here to make that presentation or not.
Okay,
and usually was me. So let me go and find that.
Well, why don't we do that? Let's move on to the next item on the agenda whilst that's happening. Yeah, and we'll come back to this item when we get ready. So moving on then to the section around strategic system oversight, and we've got a presentation, I believe, on the winter plan. That might be one.
No,
Sorry,
it's a trip.
Okay. So, thank you for giving us this opportunity to present in terms of winter. Why am I speaking first? Well, I have the pleasure of being the UEC system lead, and I say that because having been here for the last year now, it's a really well attended system meeting. We went into it and we all recognise that it's been challenging. What we have done throughout the last 12 months is made sure that we take the learning from the last 12 months. One of the key elements from it is that we recognised that our GP colleagues needed to be closer to the conversations, and I'm really delighted, and it's not because you're probably going to catch my eye in a minute, but there are a number of people who are really at those meetings. It does feel as though we are patients and citizens that we're trying to do. So we came out of last winter. I think we built relationships in terms of making sure that we work closely together. One of there's 4 pillars that we deliberately said let's not make it complex for this year, and one of them was about winter. So we've been planning winter since probably feels like April. What we wanted to do today was to share with you in terms of the work that we've done. Our system plan has got an awful lot of moving parts, and over the next 6 weeks it's a really critical phase for us because lots of different partners are doing work that we planned, but also in terms of upping their resilience for winter. For anybody that's working across the site, even this week, it's really challenging. But what we do now is that we've made sure, along with kind of the flu vaccination campaign, and also in terms of making sure, and it's great that Harriet's with us as well, because one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that citizens are aware of what's available for them. So we've taken the learning, we've had lots of people testing our plans, and what the 3 of us wants to do is to share with you about those plans and make sure there's nothing that we've missed, but also to give some confidence in terms of how we are, I believe, approaching it far more resilient than we have been on previously.
No, I'm happy to take us through the slide deck with Karen, if that's helpful. So the reason we've done the slide deck is because the paper in your pack is our winter plan, but we've had regulatory NHS feedback since. So we thought it would be helpful just to have a few overview slides and then pull some of that feedback into that. If you go to the next slide, please. So everybody's seen my ridiculously busy slide. But this was basically all of our UEC objectives. And Joe said, we feel like we've started winter planning in April. We actually started in February of 25 in terms of winter planning, because this was always what we wanted to achieve over the summer and autumn months in order to be in a better position, both for winter, not just in the short term, but in the longer term. My reflections are coming into this post just over a year ago, because we had UEC pathways that felt quite fragmented, and therefore the whole ambition of this was to bring it all together and focus on the patient pathway rather than piecemeal in terms of some of the developments that we needed to do. So if you go to the next slide, please. So basically there are a number of key things happening, as Joe said, over the next 6 weeks. So our new provider of GP out of hours starts on the 1st of October in a week's time. We also have our introduction of our MDT at the front door, so we will have an increased number of clinical assessments being able to be undertaken at the front door of our ED to ensure that the patients that go into ED need to be there, and that we can signpost patients to the right services at the right time when they need them. We've heard previously around our urgent community response around actually this is a great service, but it's only effectively 9 till 5, 9 till 6. So that service will be extending in October, but also we'll be enhancing the medical oversight that have been raised previously at board around supporting our clinicians and our patients and supporting patients predominantly at home. We're also going to talk about, talked about care transfer hub in our AGM. Our whole plan is to extend that because that's been a rousing success over the last 12 months, as Simon said earlier. That will be extended in October, later into the day and over weekends, so it will be a 7-day service. Time permitting, Chair, to have a video on the care transfer at the end, just to publicise some of the good work that they do as a team. The other element, which is a really important element, the whole ethos of our improvement plan this year has always been how to provide better care, increased care to our community out of hospital, but predominantly how can we ensure patients stay at home and are cared for at home in a better setting for themselves. So increasing our domiciliary care, the ability to look after patients, discharge them earlier and allow them to go home rather than go elsewhere is a real push in terms of this improvement plan. So this slide here, Gareth will take us through it in a second, but effectively between February till about now and into the next 6 weeks, it's all about delivery of enhancing our community offer to our population. Gareth's just going to cover the more tactical elements regarding our winter plan and the elements of that. So I'll pass on to Gareth.
Thanks very much, Ian. So with all that as a foundation, we've got 3 objectives on the top left of the slide here. We want to enter winter in the best position we possibly can this year. We did find ourselves on the back foot from November onwards last year, so we're not repeat that. We're then going to seek to avoid being overmatched by the pressures with a number of interventions, which I'll elaborate on. And importantly, we want to exit winter on a really solid footing. As we go into next year. Winter that has just finished did tend to drift into April for us. We still experience pretty high pressure. So we just want to make sure that we don't step off too early from our winter response to make sure that we do that on a really solid footing into the new year. So 5 stages to what we're setting out to do this winter. Importantly, we'll deliver those programs that Ian's outlined already. The focus for the run-up to the Christmas period is to try to reduce that rising pressure that we know that we're going to get. So have a really determined system-wide effort to offset those pressures. The dark block in the middle highlights a thing that we're paying really close attention to, which we're describing here as the festive fortnight. Because in that period, there are effectively 2 4-day weekends where the holidays lie. We've got to make sure that we clear enough space before that point to get through, but importantly, make sure we've got enough staff and all of the system functions able to deliver, because the UEC pathway, of course, won't stop during that period. After which we anticipate having used quite a bit of our capacity, so we'll need to have a recovery period, decompress and rebuild our reserve, sustain that through February and March, and then, as I said in the opener, transition out of winter on a solid basis. So there are 3 categories of interventions that we're making as a system this year: enduring, seasonal, and responsive. And have the next slide, please, Martin, just elaborate on those. So some of these have been covered already by Ian. I won't go through line by line, but the point I want to make here is that we have those high impact programs which will set us for the future as well as for this winter. There are enduring schemes that will just make our pathway better for us going forward. We have a number of system funded interventions, which are the seasonal ones in the central block here, including supporting primary care and new to us this year, discharge medicine service enhancement to prevent reattendance and readmission in a hospital. We're maintaining a small reserve of funding, but also activity to respond if what we've already put in place isn't enough to counter the pressures. We might do more of the schemes on the left-hand side, but importantly, we want things ready to enact within 24 hours to make a decision. This year, when we found ourselves needing to declare a system-wide critical incident at the turn of the new year, we were really limited on what we had available to intervene, and we are going to change that this year and have some options for us to work with. If I go next slide, please. Vaccinations is a very clear national priority this year, as well as one for us. Generally speaking, we do pretty well relative to the rest of the region and nationally in our vaccination programme. Partnership groups being set up, led by Rachel, who I'll invite to add in a moment. In August, it's been meeting fortnightly. The key output is to deliver our improvement. And Rachel, can I invite you to say anything else?
Thank you. So, just so what I've just said, one of the key drivers this year, but has always been there, is around preventive ways to get system. So we have pulled together an improvement plan to increase rates of immunisation for the main be to include all into the backs up tape, even though, as we said, we already do relatively well as a system. There'll be much more we can do. We want to use a data-led approach, so looking at the data, looking at qualities and different groups and different agents, have a focus heavily around that. And it's actually really complex immunisation vaccines delivered by lots of different parts of the system, from general practice to our pharmacies to our the shop farm to our workforce objects. It's actually a very complex system. So bringing everybody together collectively to coordinate our response around that, to look at how we can productive, to make sure that we're doing our targeted work around inequality in the right areas. So we've pulled together a plan. All partners are represented in that whole idea to bring all partners together. We've only just started a few meetings, but our ambition is there to increase uptake, and we're taking that at TK's place level. So both Quip and SHIP are really focused on increasing uptake rates. It's obviously really strong local place here and getting those messages out to our communities and signposting people. This will start in earnest as we go into the next few weeks. There's going to be lots of media that's going to be published around this and as I said, we're taking an evidence-based approach, so we'll be monitoring uptake across all programmes, and particularly SHIP and Quip and the Health and Wellbeing Board, focusing on the inequality elements. So really bringing partners together to make sure that we can actually work with this uptake, not just for winter, but we're starting with winter and then obviously across all programmes, particularly focused on some of our children, so and young people. We're looking to increase some of the low uptake rates, but then also some of our groups where we are not seeing that kind of data around that. This is the integrated health and partners who want to be involved in that will be really push that, particularly the intervention workforce as well. And even though, for example, some of our local authorities will have the same targets set against them, that can really not like that is a really important strand about where to talk to and building and hopefully reducing some of the.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Can you cover the next slide, please, Martin? There's a lot on this slide, which I won't go through all of it, but I produced this just to draw out the key findings from two significant assurance events that we've done with NHS England this month. We received a strong team from the Midlands region for an assurance visit to the system on 4th September. Generally speaking, they left pleased with what we've done. They admired our level of ambition, and the point was that the left really was to now just deliver what it is that we're setting out to do. Last week, a group of 9 of us from across the system, including most partners, joined the rest of the care systems across the region for what's been described as a stress test exercise. This has been nationally publicised. It's a nationally led, regionally delivered endeavour, and we shared some of the learning across systems. There was some alignment of the response across the region overall. a useful day, I thought, and we made a number of follow-up commitments that we're going to deliver following that, which are listed in the right-hand side. I think that what I'd like to leave you with on this slide really is the feedback letter that we received from NHS England at the bottom. I've put an extract there. Progress very strongly welcomed for a number of reasons, but the focus is absolutely on delivery, which we know and will certainly do that. Most of the schemes that Ian described and covered are well underway for delivery now. Can the next slide, please, Martin? This is the last slide for me. And you asked this year is to submit to the national team. All ICBs and trusts are asked to submit a board assurance statement with a checklist of window preparedness issues to satisfy themselves that they have reviewed and done. I've just put a summary here of the boards that have taken place with our providers, and all the board's assurance statements have been reviewed, supported by the chief execs and chairs of the boards, and the providers around the table will know that. And there is an ask in the paper today for the board to have considered and, if content, approve our board assurance statement, which we would then be in a position to submit on time by next week. And if we go to the next slide, please, back to Ian for some of the key risks.
So just to summarise, really, obviously we've done a huge amount of work, and I can't underestimate how much work there is to do over the next 6 weeks in terms of having all those services either extending and going further than we were before, or some of the new services like modular awards or whatever it may be. There's a huge amount of work still to be done between now. But a lot of that comes into action as of next week, really, in terms of October and onwards, October to December. We are very much cited on our risks. This slide tries to articulate whether it's new providers coming into our system, whether it's all the estate infrastructure that needs changing, whether it's supporting our workforce to adapt to the different ways of working that we're doing. But we are very aware that we are making a lot of change over a small amount of time, but for the right reasons. Last year we were making improvements, trying to make improvements in December and January. That was never going to happen as effectively as we like. So therefore, this is the real push and pace we're moving to as we move into October and November. And then the last slide. So I've talked a lot about some new things we're doing this year that are coming to fruition. But one of the things that Simon mentioned is our care transfer hub. I'm pleased the question came out in the AGM around how we're publicising some of the good work we're doing. So what our initiative this year is to extend what the care transfer hub do, as I said, into the evening and over weekend. And apologies, colleagues, if you've already seen this video, because it has been various communications in the last week or so. But I just thought it'd be a nice way to end around all of the work some of our staff are doing, which is multi-professional across the whole system. So I think it's only 2 or 3 minutes, Chair.
That's fine.
Human technology.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe challenge that. Sharing.
Okay.
Technology is key to this, so let's make sure that it is available to us through the chat or via email later. But those who haven't seen it. Joe, anything you wish to sort of say in conclusion?
Thank you. Just to say, in terms of we aren't complacent in terms of the work that needs to be done. That we know the headline metrics in terms of our UED performance, but there has been a significant improvement in terms of, especially in terms of ambulance delay and handovers. What I would say is that at the moment it's not for faint-hearted in the amount of work that's got to be done between the next 6 to 8 months. It's significant. I mean, we'll start to see those improvements start playing in November. But just thank you, because people continue to turn up to the meeting board and are coming with ideas and solutions, and it does feel like it's useful.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments, observations? Anybody?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here and to say that the kind of three measures in place early this year. I think that has to be key. Just one question, and I've seen sort of presentations and talks about this, including just this morning. There is this hope, and I agree it will be a time of pressure. But actually, the pressure usually comes after. Last year, I think it was a bit atypical because we had the flu week earlier than usual. So the pressure, I think, for most clinicians attending comes in the first and second of January. If you've got too much effort focused on that fortnight and then your recovery, you're going to come up with some stuff. So I would be really keen to hear that actually you've taken that model and you've got that cover in place going into January, both in terms of demand and also the other thing, as well as when the flu peak happens and the size of that peak, is actually workforce sickness patterns. In fact, the other thing that gets you in a big flu peak, you actually lose your workforce. What steps have you got in place to ensure you've got that workforce resilience if people are sick and you can bring others in? Because again, we had this morning as a GP, we hate that. It's very nice for you to try and refer the patient to our service. It's supposed to help, but actually we haven't got capacity, so back to you. Those are the things we want to hear, that actually you've got that covered.
Yeah. I'll have to speak up and then so I completely agree. When I think about last winter, we had very few beds in Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals on Christmas Eve. So we've challenged ourselves this year particularly that actually we need to help decompress all of our urgent care, emergency care as best we can before the festive 2 weeks. So you're absolutely right. And that will put us in a better position going in both into the festive period where Gareth's absolutely right. We need to look at provision of care so it doesn't impact as much. But you're absolutely right. January is always the month. We all know that over numerous winters. And therefore, a lot of the winter mitigations that we've got and where we spent those monies on are around decompressing before we get to the challenging of January, whether it be extra transport, improved communication, whatever.
Yeah, the reason we picked up on that fortnight, you'll remember all that we get into January. Whilst all partners went into their critical incident escalation, what we couldn't be doing is trying to get the workforce. The fact on the queue at this minute, we're doing Christmas rotors. So what we concentrate on that is to say, can you make sure that you've got the workforce available if you need it? And in terms of making sure that, as Rachel's already said, one of the things we want to do is make sure that our staff are well vaccinated, that we're in one. But I think we all know in terms of it is that the beginning of January, but the reason we've concentrated on that is because what we want partners to say it's business as usual. So we're not cancelling Christmas, but we're trying to say, can you please just. But I think, we talk about Christmas, but actually this is about seasonal variance because as Gareth said at the start, we also see it at Easter. So actually we can predict most of this, and it's also
Nothing.
Thank you for the presentation. I was just struck about how little there was about the ambulance service in there and the engagement with the ambulance service. Very crucial to how patients can arrive at different facilities. I wonder what we were doing to get them as part of this plan.
so they do attend the community board. They are very much part of this. And I have to say, in terms of the work that we've done around our Cat 3 ambulances, I think we've three into a new model with Health Hero, and we have just finished off as one of the top performing trusts in the Midlands in terms of their response around. So they are very much part of it, and I'm very fortunate because Andy Proctor, who is employed by the RCB as the Director of UC Equivalent, is also a paramedic. So he's very much on the sites and also in terms of dialogue. So we are very lucky that they do turn up. So it's very difficult for them to cover all of the hospital, but we did have attendance in yesterday.
I think just supporting that. I was on the out of hours workshop that we had. The Telford was talking about different flows and things. and West Midlands Ambulance were certainly there with that, and it's really interesting to see, actually seeing how they were going, how you can't say that Cat 3 is what I was unaware of in terms of patterns. But so they've already sort of established quite a good relationship with Health Hero in terms of how they can do that, and certainly that was one of the big things being acknowledged in that workshop, which was general, not necessarily specific to UEC, but it's the out of hours, so it might be urgent. So there's certainly an appetite to engage. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Good presentation. Just a couple of questions. First of all, one of the appendices mentions system winter schemes to be funded in. Am I right to assume they've all been funded? And my second question is, out of all the new developments planned to be implemented,
I can do the first one because that's maybe lovely. The first one, yes, we are absolutely. They are funded, and we're in the process of mobilisation. So that's given. And actually, it's a good one to call out. NHS through our assurance, we were actually commended for allocation of winter funds this year, whereas some of the systems have not been able to do that. So we've been commended for keeping that those monies available to support care and patients. So that's really positive. And the one that I'm probably the one that will keep me most up at night in terms of ensuring delivered. I don't think I worry about any of them particularly because I'm confident that we have the right leads driving those changes. I think where it always will be is whether we have the workforce in place in a timely manner to be able to do these things we want to do. And we are asking our staff to work differently. So I wouldn't pick one particular scheme, but I would say we need to make sure we look after our staff as they go through all this change.
Sure, what are your sleepless nights?
Obviously, I sleep like a baby. I would say that whilst there's not one particular that I'm worried about, but I've never seen a plan with so much change going into it. There are, on top of the slides that Ian shared with you, there's 56 beds going on to the RSH side, there's 40 assessment and trolleys going on to PR8. And then we need everybody to know about all those changes and all that to hit. So I think it's the scale of what we're trying to do and it's how we support our staff in terms of understanding and navigating in those. But we are on track with every one of those things.
And I presume ensuring that the government's oversight is there, provide oversight challenge assurance as we go through as one of the next crucial 2 or 3 months is going to be actually vital, isn't it?
It is, and I think obviously we meet with NHS England on a very regular basis because of the performance, and I think there's something about we have to also hold our nerves in terms of we knew that this wasn't going to bite until later in the year, and what we've been really clear about there, we have a plan, it's a good plan, we have to stick to it. So I think it's something about how we also future with
You want to know what plan we want.
There's a key enabler that's going to be really, really important that we have is the vaccination. And it's so not just vaccination of our population, but particularly vaccination of our healthcare staff. A lot of vaccination can be out there, and there's a lot of misinformation, but we know that the vaccines are safe and they do work. And it's going to be vital to keeping the wheels turning to make sure that our public are protected, but also our staff are protected. So just making sure that we have the right level of scrutiny on those rates, and we'll just be working towards optimising that.
And of course, and that's emphasised following recent events as well. That's great. Thank you very much for a useful conversation. In terms of the recommendations, we've been invited to note the progress of the UEC improvement programme, approve the system plan to mitigate additional CO2 pressure, and also agree to sufficient winter can subject to any final amendments by myself and Simon. People content with those and approve those recommendations? Great, thank you very much. And just want to acknowledge the work that's taking place across the system and with different partners to get to a very strong place. Now it's about we're now going back on the agenda in terms of the residents' experience. I'm delighted to welcome to talk about the Women's Health Hub. I don't know who wants to go.
Nigel.
Yeah, go on, Nigel.
So I'll just try to get out of the way.
Just say, nice and intimidating, we're not intimidating. So,
So I'll just a couple of words of introduction. And thank you, because I know there's still a track. Really, really great. I think we talked earlier actually about a range of different initiatives and in our transformation committee, and women's health hub has been something that's absolutely been to the agenda for the last 3 years. So really grateful to Naomi, who's taken a really key part, but this absolutely has been a system approach and a partner approach. But we just wanted to bring it to life today. Really, really grateful for the project. So over to Naomi.
Thanks, Nigel. And just to introduce myself, so Naomi Roche, I'm the Health Population Lead in Shropshire Council Public Health, but also the joint host of the ICB and leading on the and with us today is Di from our community outreach and wellbeing team with Public Health in Shropshire Council, and Asia, who has come all the way from Pregnant with her baby to talk to us about the experience she had in relation to the work that was led by Deborah in the South West PCN in Shropshire. So all of you had a copy of the report, so I won't labour on it, but I think at the heart of this work has been around addressing inequalities in particular. And I think the approach that we took collaboratively with primary care, colleagues in secondary care, mission services and the community was what communities needed and what was important to them in relation to women's health and their health. So I'm going to hand over to Natalie. I'm going to talk to you about the experience that they've had and the opportunity that was afforded to the community in Craven Arms through the South West.
Thanks, Naomi. Hello.
Okay.
So during my outreach work, I was able to meet people within the Craven Arms community, and I met Asia on occasion, and we built a relationship together, discussing about women's health and what was sort of things that we used to provide further information to help them. So we came up with a plan, and we thought, okay, we need to sort of, one of the things the ladies, I think what the ladies would like to know more about was the menopause, and maybe they were lacking some information and knowledge. So we got together, didn't we? And with Deborah as well, we got time together and we held a session in Craven Arms. And we came up with a few little questions that go through together. So I'll just go through those for you. So Askia, I'd like to what helped your community feel comfortable when engaging with the support session?
I think the session was within our community, so it was took place in our area, so it was accessible. People could come easily. There was no transport issue. It was delivered by a woman. They just say so there was a lady who delivered the session. I think that was good because it was a topic to do with menopause and be much more comfortable in female. And yeah, so that was good. Could have taken place in a community centre and open to everybody else. That would be good too. But I feel maybe those women who are not good with their English, they could come to it, they'll understand parts of it, but then they won't feel comfortable speaking up because they might feel that their English is not too good. So they just take the back seat and just listen in. So because if they try to talk, they might make mistakes. So I think it was more beneficial for us to have it just in our thing. It's a new phone as well. And should I ask another question?
Yeah.
Move along.
So, in what way has sport made a difference to your community?
So, in what way did you say? Yeah, does the support make a difference to your community? I think the information about menopause were very vague, like menopause, and that's it. We got to know in detail what is after menopause and what is menopause, what's perimenopause, what's post-menopause, and all the symptoms. Because sometimes you're so worried about, oh, why am I feeling like this? But if you know it was because of menopause, then you know what's happening in your body and what's happening. So that was really beneficial, just that information. You know what's happening, what you can expect, not yet. So that was really good. It was informative, yeah.
So how well do you feel support understood and respected your community culture and tradition?
In terms of segregation, I think having only female is there was no I think segregation was having ladies only was more comfortable.
Do you think having the second translated into Urdu is helpful?
Yeah, that was helpful. And we were given the handouts was really good at the end of the session, and that had the Urdu writing and the English writing, so that was really
yes. Got here, can you share any difficulties people face in making use of the support?
People who are at work couldn't come really. We've got in our community, we've got quite a lot of youngsters just settled in with hardly any English, so I think they would not benefit as much. There was Urdu, but somebody who spoke Urdu, maybe that would benefit them even.
Yeah.
Yeah. But majority of the ladies do understand Urdu. English. They understand the English, but it's just the speaking is.
The Urdu that they understand, is it like quite basic English or the medical terminology? Do they struggle with that side of things possibly? Do we need to make it more sort of understandable possibly?
Yeah, there's the standard English.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's the terminology and complications. Okay, so what changes have you noticed in your community's health and well-being, the outlets in choosing the support?
So after the session, there was a conversation that took place. I think that was really good. We spoke about how we should make changes in our lifestyle so that we can ride this stage easily. And then some of the ladies came up with, we want to do a weight management. That's the first step they thought we want to do. So it's really good. It led this session then led into the awareness of weight management. And now we've got a session booked on the 2nd of October where we'll be heading that. And it's social prescriber as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it starts a chain of goodness, I think, which is really good and helpful. Whilst we were speaking to the lady that was delivering Sheila, she also mentioned about how the flow so it really helped us change our ways, better practice, be made us more conscious about our actions now.
So, what does having this service available mean for you?
As I said, it's good, like it's been good, and leads to more good.
What what else would you like to see differently to make support available even more helpful?
I think this menopause session that we had, I think a follow-up one would be really good, where there's practical solutions to the symptoms, like for example, sleep apnea, or so if we look into these points and but we have more detail about what to do because how to try to concentrate without medication, try to through breathing, through exercise. These things would be really beneficial because the session was good in a lot of information about menopause, but then the solution was the HRT and not too much explanation about other solutions. So that would be beneficial. Because not everybody would go for the HRT hormone replacement therapy. That's what I think.
Yeah, can I just ask you, how did you feel after the session? Personally, yeah.
I learned a lot, so I felt good. And I know if I go to the doctor, what's available, that's really good. You only have like a few minutes with the doctor. It's quite short. So it's good. I know what's available to me. But I did feel at the end that, oh, what a terrible thing to go through. Yeah, because I was thinking in my mind, no, HRT is not my solution to go for. So what's my solution? What do I go to? So that's why I said it'd be good to have a follow-up session.
No, I was just going to say, would this solution, that's not good for HRT, is that to do with your religious, or is that just to do with your personal needs?
It's my personal.
Yes. Yeah, it's just quite interesting to just know some further information.
Thank you so much, Aoife, for the questions, and also for your willingness to come and answer. If there's a couple of questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes. Okay. Just time for me, one or two. I know you've got to say.
Projects to work with, and I really want to highlight these three ladies that really making it work. We started off in the PCN with having identified a population that we wanted to work with, that we felt that we weren't necessarily reaching with. I think the key messages that I took from it and that I think are the learning to take forward that we can observe. First of all, not to make assumptions. I went and met with ASEA and the community with some ideas in my head of things that we could do. ASEA was incredibly welcoming, and that's due to her. But also, I really want to highlight Di's work in this. Di worked extensively with this community and others. But the fact that she built up this mutually accepting and respectful relationship and made it really, her role has been vital in this. ASEA was very welcoming, but also thought really carefully and was able to articulate what was going to be helpful. And I'm confident enough to say, actually, some of the suggestions I made, actually, no, that's not relevant to us. We can sort that for ourselves. But actually, this is and therefore we had lots of ideas and suggestions and things to go. And it wasn't just about menopause. We talked a lot about maternity care, about education around diabetes and weight management, about how you access services for the GP. I certainly found out about how to access various sort of information materials in different languages. The second thing that was really key here, and this is where Naomi is an absolute star, was about the system working and us all being able to network, because actually some of the things I see in the community came up with going, oh, I don't quite know how to provide that. That's not actually kind of happening. So I'll go away and find out. It was next week, and I was there, and I thought, oh, well, I've got you all in the room. Can anyone tell me who I need to speak to about this? And Naomi and Simon Fletcher and a couple of other people said, yeah, I'm sure we can put you in touch with people. And after that, we're a serum group, which was really dynamic and certainly made things happen. I think it's important, a lot of us, again, it's coming back to that assumption. So there are some things where, for example, I went to a service manager to say, we need to support this particular community. And that person kind of said, oh yes, we're aware of that community and we've put this in place. And I had to kind of say, that's really good and I'm glad you're thinking about it, but actually the things you put in place aren't quite working, can we think differently? And that was a little bit of a challenge. So we need to be prepared to challenge our assumptions and that what we are doing is the right thing. It's so important to the people in the community that we're working with to understand what their needs are and what. And then I think that it is, I had to leave the project before it came to fruition, so it's lovely to be all in here. And I was absolutely praying as I was leaving that Naomi and I would be taking this further and taking this learning out more widely so we can apply it to our projects. And this is absolutely exactly what we're working towards in terms of neighbourhood work. And so it was brilliant.
One more contribution, I think. Sorry.
Thank you. So if anyone doesn't know me, I'm Lynn Corey, Chief Officer of Telford and Shropshire. So a couple of years ago, I had to speak to the man and his wife in Craven Arms and ask them directly what it was they needed to assist the system. And this was the thing that they talked about. So I'm really pleased to see that after such a, what feels like a long time, it's happened. And I suppose for me, the most important thing is that it continues to happen, but that also it is accessible to those people who are working and other groups as well. So I'm really pleased that it happened. So I'm mentioning it at health and wellbeing boards and quality performance committees, that it finally happened under the banner of the Women's Health Hub. I think it's a really positive thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for coming today, you've been clearly preparing really well to make your contribution. Having such a well-behaved baby. But also for your willingness to answer both questions in this form. It's really important to us, but we hear everybody's voice. You say hi to your mum for us, folks. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on now back onto the agenda to the chair's report. I don't wish to add anything to the report apart from two things. So let's move on when Deborah's back in the room. So firstly, just to check on her appointment as the chief executive officer, that might be shifting after I'm going to say both staff and Shropcom for your leadership of the two trusts now. So thank you very much for that. And also just to note, I believe that yesterday the two boards agreed to enter into a. Andrew, is there anything you wish to sort of say in terms of headlines for us?
Yes, thank you. So I think we've had a number of discussions over several months with colleagues across the system about creating a group being staff. So both boards met in common yesterday in public and formally signed that off. So we have a bit more work to do to get all the mechanics in place. But it's very much about an enabler of what we want to do together on integration, flow, pathways, value for money, etc. So it is very much shared leadership, shared governance. Joe, as you say, is now chief executive of both. I obviously am chair of both. I think you'll start to see the in common bit finishing and that changing to group chair and group chief executive. We've got a bit of assurance work to do with our NHS England colleagues. Not a process whereby we pass or fail. So yes, it's about being better together, making it better, not just different. So I look forward to continuing to work with colleagues, but viewing us much more as one sort of group. We are remaining as two statutory organisations. For those who say, why haven't you just merged? Yes, great idea, but if you've ever seen the process for NHS plus merging, you'll see why we're not wasting the next 2 or 3 years of our life. But we are going to run it much as one organisation as is legal decent. So yes, looking forward to doing things better.
Thanks, Andrew. Is there any, well, I've already offered this, anything we can do to support that? Because I think a real enabler for transfer of services out from providers into the community and developing the left shift. So do please let us know if there's anything you need in the system over the course of the next few months as the group is established. And the other point I want to make is, Deborah, I believe this is your last meeting.
I'll be here in
Last public meeting, I believe. And so on behalf of the board, thank you for your technical leadership across our system for a long period of time, but also for your contribution to the board. And it's clear we've just seen the impact you've made. Thank you very much for that. Just one point I would highlight in my report relating to the changes at a system level, obviously the clustering of 2 ICBs. It is quite a lot of change taking place at present. And I think it's really important that we are treated to responding to some of those changes. And also, there is also a degree of ambiguity, and we just need to acknowledge that ambiguity. And I have now been appointed as the chair of the cluster, so the 2 ICBs. I'll assume the role at Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent on the 1st of November. And that there will be an announcement about the chief executive imminently. And then again, a process about how then we govern the cluster, and in terms of executive leadership, there's quite a lot of change taking place. So I will ensure that board members are kept informed as we go through the process, because I think that change can happen fairly quickly once we get the green light in terms of what the next steps might be. But we're still waiting for some further guidance from NHS. Any questions that anyone wishes to ask on my report? Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And again, we'll take the report as read. As ever, with the Chief Executive report, it pulls together some of the national publications, as well as then bring some local context of the things that are happening. I'm just going to focus on a couple of areas of the local context, if that's okay. So we had in this room, actually, at the beginning of August, a really full, as already referenced in the AGM, session with Dr. Claire Fuller, Medical Director for Primary Care for NHS England, where we have an opportunity to showcase the work and progress that's been made across the primary care in its widest sense. Set in really good conversation, really good discussion, really positive meeting on that basis. We recognising timing of these meetings and timing of the Chief Executive report, there was an update in terms of the progress around the GPL developers, but actually there's been quite a lot of conversation about that already in the winter conversation. There is a really positive step here as well in the removal of our legal directions. So I do want to highlight that. Colleagues will be aware that the ICB was put in undertakings back in May 2024. But we've continued to work with NHS England, focused on the improvements across the system, improvement of the organisation,
and we've now received full compliance certificates, and those directions and legal undertakings have all been removed, which is positive for the ICB and positive for the system, and that's further reinforced with the annual assessment letter that's been received that recognises the work and progress that's been made. Final two bits from me then, Chair, is equally, it's zero care homes rated inadequate across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin is a really important marker in terms of quality of care for some of our most vulnerable members of our community. So I didn't want to go through my report without highlighting on that. It reflects a real joint working, local authorities, care home providers and owners, our quality team, primary care, mental health team. I will miss somebody, and that's not intentional, but you don't end up in that situation without really strong partnership working across all of our services. So I wanted to recognise that and say thank you to colleagues for that. Those are the things that make a difference genuinely to the populations and people that we serve. And equally then is to recognise, and previously recognised Telford's work in this area, Telford's work in this area, Shropshire County Council's recent Ofsted report into children's services, which was published and demonstrated an outstanding outcome in terms of that, which is, again, testament to the work that's taken place, but also is a genuine positive impact for the children across our population. So to have both local authorities in that space is really impressive, actually, and again, makes a difference. And on that point, it would be remiss of me to close my report without recognising that Andy Bagley, Chief Exec of Shropshire County Council, has announced his departure from the council. I would count him as a friend as well as a colleague, as I know colleagues were around this table, so important that I just recognise and thank him for his leadership of the council and his commitment to the system working, which has undoubtedly made a positive difference in this space. And he helped me massively when I first came to Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin in terms of settling in and providing significant support in that place. So I want to recognise that. I think it's important that our thanks and our best wishes are recorded in the minutes. Thank you. Any questions first, Simon? Great, thank you very much. Then let's move on to the risk management report again. It is, and there's lots of papers in the appendix on this. I think the executive summary is really clear. It updates on the risks that have been updated and the changes that have been made, both in terms of board assurance framework and the strategic operational risk register, as well as the ICB strategic operational risk register. I do not intend to go through any of those in detail unless there are any questions and any difficult questions, and you will.
And I guess there has been also then a very different risk as well in the process of the transition of moving towards the model ICB and the clustering with Shropshire, Telford and with Staffordshire Stoke on Trent, and making sure that we're capturing that and that's actively managed as well. Absolutely. Any questions on the risk register? Read the recommendations outlined in the report. Thank you very much. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the health aging strategy.
Thank you, Chair. And so I'm presenting the health aging strategy report by the board. It's a newly developed strategy, the first time that Shropshire Telford in an ICB and a system strategy to address frailty from a health perspective. It links in very much with both council's priorities and indeed a further strategy on ageing well that's in Telford and Wrekin. Those are both partnership programme boards, SHIP and Twin Path endorse strategy, as have both health and wellbeing boards and the system strategy development as well. The business case for health aging strategy is both quality one and financial one. Our older populations are expected to rise in the next 20 to 30 years, and we will see significant change, particularly in the over 90s, where we're expecting a doubling of that population in both
areas, both Telford and Wrekin and Shropshire and Wrekin. And the strategies really use public health data to underpin it, to say what do we need to do in order to not only address frailty, but to actually work to prevent it or reverse it in some instances as well. So it's an ambitious strategy that really sets a cultural change across Shropshire in the way that we address both the needs of younger people at risk of frailty, but also, and the main strand of the strategy is older people. And it doesn't take much to have, to just look at the attendances in the emergency department and the people that get stuck there for long periods of time while they're being sorted out, see the importance of that wherever we can. We had, as you heard, those of you that attended the AGM, we had extensive consultation on the strategy, although it wasn't for long, it was for 6 weeks and really condensed, but it went far and wide. And there were 16 groups in Shropshire and 17 groups in Wrekin that were gone to face-to-face targeted groups which attracted over 65s in order to get their feedback, as well as online surveys and other methods of engagement. So that 1,000, or just under 1,000 pieces of feedback, which also included, I must say, importantly, health and social care workers and the voluntary sector, has helped to shape the strategy. And actually, the version that follows that is quite different to the version that we had before. One of the key areas that I've been asked to point out from the somebody that's actually in the AGM and has had to leave, but was the reason for calling this a healthy ageing strategy. So it addresses frailty, which is a medical term for the the long-term deterioration of people as they become more complex with various long-term conditions. However, that terminology is popular in the public in conversations with geriatrics as well, which also traditionally wasn't a particularly popular term. So we had, so we asked what should we call it then, and healthy ageing actually fit really well because this is the health element of the kind of puzzle, but notwithstanding that it does link. So I'm not going to go through the strategy in any more detail than that really, but I'm really happy to take any comments or questions from them.
Thanks for so comments or questions, any observations from anybody?
I think I should reinforce, and we've got a good theme today about the neighbourhood working and focus on community. And as we work together with both health and wellbeing boards and place-based partnerships, then frailty and healthy ageing is a consistent theme. And we know also in terms of the proportion of cohorts of population working with Dawn and colleagues that the population that we need to support in this is an area of real priority. And that's all the demands that and the support of those residents need. So it's a really important thing for us. But where this is not a strategy that's going to sit an alternative part of what we do.
And as in terms of the process that we'll adopt in terms of monitoring the impact of this.
Yes, so the strategy has got its own steering group already that's helped to develop the strategy. That will now take us shift into implementation of the strategy, and some of Jess and others around the table are part of that to help us ensure that that's going in the right direction. One of the really useful pieces of feedback from the health and wellbeing boards was to ensure that we have a group of older people at risk of frailty to actually have to speak to and make sure we consider the impact we want to do. But the other thing is now more understanding helpful. It's the name of it. The neighbourhood implementation. So we will continue to report there and be held to account for the delivery of
points. Asked to note the report and also approve the healthy ageing strategy for 2025-2028. To agree that. Thank you very much. We give our thanks to the colleagues who've been so heavily involved in developing the strategy. Moving on then to the neighbourhood implementation programme.
So just a few points to note, Chair, if I may. I think the first is the purpose of bringing this here is that there has been quite a significant amount of activity in neighbourhood health over the past few months. not least obviously triggered by the 10-year plan, although there was initial neighbourhood health guidelines from the earlier in the year, but then a maturity matrix, the national programme, and a variety of other different planning neighbourhood health guidance. So this seeks to just bring some of that together to update the board on the aspects of the work. It is, of course, utterly pivotal in terms of how we plan to wrap services around residents, and also as one of the mechanisms of really looking at the transformation of service models that we've described. And of course, fantastic opportunity to hear about an example of that. The maturity self-assessment matrix, that's the 10 components actually that the NHS has set out, really helps set our context and priorities, not only building on the areas where we already do well, but looking at the other areas to develop. What I would highlight is that whilst the NHS has really focused on this in the past few weeks, of course, this is our hugely important delivery mechanism is through our integrated base partnerships, and we've got some city committee reports later on. So I would highlight here that neighbourhood health and the neighbourhood model is absolutely integrated, and we're absolutely working hand in glove with local authorities, etc., as well as all NHS partners. I think the final point is we know that there was a national programme, and as SGW we're really pleased that we're going to be part of that first wave, and we know, and we already have talked about anything that we benefit from that. We've got an opportunity of sharing that already across the system, so that is really, really important. Really,
I can say a bit about by being part of the national programme. What does that mean in practice?
So I think they're still probably sorting out the finer detail, but it is intended to not only develop as a community practice, but look at a series of measures and the 10 components provide a framework to look at the areas of work that we need to prioritise. I think it will help all systems and nationally look at what are those measures of effectiveness. We talk in the 10-year plan about the 3 shifts, how it really focuses on changing the dial in terms of the demand on both general practice and the front doors in EDs and general hospitals. I think it really has got an opportunity of triggering the opportunities of using technology in a different way. And of course, we know, through the 10-year plan, prevention is such an important strand. And so it's really seeking to understand how prevention is properly being delivered and sustained, and also how it's delivering and making an impact. So I think it's the information we've seen so far, and it's rapidly coming is really seeking to, as I say, pull that together, learn from each other as this initial set of 43, I think there is, identified areas, and then and rapidly develop that. And as I say, that it will inform what the nationally we want to do, as well as then learn from each other.
Thanks. Trevor.
Hi, yes. Forgive me, the quality of the sound isn't always great coming through, but when we had a workshop last year with our GPs, we had a really interesting discussion around how they should be or could be up front and centre in any neighbourhood approach to looking after our residents, since there is clearly a network there that is already in existence. And I guess I was surprised to not see general practice with a slightly higher profile. They're obviously there and an important part of it, but to run a GP network almost in parallel to a neighbourhood network doesn't seem particularly efficient.
Okay, so
Shall I do it?
Go on, Jess.
Yeah.
Go first, and I'll hand over back to you.
I might be able to help there. So one of my jobs is as a clinical director for South East Shropshire TCM. And I think the formal general practice being mentioned in what Nigel's just delivered doesn't mean that there isn't a huge amount of neighbourhood work that's actually happening already. And I think prior to this, there were various different neighbourhood projects that were happening in different PCNs and actually predated the formal concept, I think, of neighbourhood working. Certainly, you've heard from Deborah sort of the work that she's done. I've done some work. You've got Ian here who's doing some work in Telford on the same stuff.
So the neighbourhood working is there. Is it formalised as neighbourhood working as dictated by sort of the 10-year plan and things? At the moment, no, that's the emphasis. That's what we're sort of waiting for, that the definitions and the needs and what the hope is for it to look like to actually get that information. I think being part of this first tranche and rollout is going to be a huge help, because I think whilst certainly we're doing some bits, I'd always welcome somebody who can support us in formalising it to the level that you're sort of describing there. I think it's a work in progress, but general practice certainly is forming a big part of that. And our neighbourhoods across SW are basically the footprints of the primary care networks. So we already have a neighbourhood that's there, and things are being delivered in those neighbourhoods already. But it's perhaps just that we've already discussed how we're not always that good at singing out what we are doing, but there are things that are happening already that will be built on and formalised. I'm not sure if that helps or not.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I guess, and this is very much a lay view, is the primary point of contact for most residents will be their GP, and therefore having that as a initial focus and touch point for the overall health, neighbourhood health initiatives just seems sensible. I mean, I might be stepping into difficult politics, so forgive me. But
no. I think it's completely right. That actually part of this and part of the neighbourhood working is actually maybe slightly changing some of that. So, for example, you look at dementia, and how much of dementia care really do I as a GP really contribute? Very minimal, I'll be honest. The vast majority is actually that holistic wraparound care, having that extra support for the carers, having the access to the let's talk about dementia, cognitive stimulation, all those sorts of things. Like we provide a much bigger thing. So part of the neighbourhood working isn't necessarily making sure that GPs are the front door for everything, but is us combining to do the best that we can with the resource that we've got. So if you sort of say to GPs, you're going to be delivering this, is that GPs are going to say, well, we're saturated, we're already working capacity, we haven't got anything more to give. But what we can do is actually work together as systems, as a neighbourhood, to enhance the health offer. And I think that's where neighbourhood working really will come in. But you're right, we are perceived to be that front door, so we have to be part of it, and we will be.
What I'm hearing is that general practice is an integral element within the development of neighbours. But I wonder whether there's a bit more that we need to re-emphasise that. Nigel, any?
Yeah, I think, and also, and obviously I've got a number of GP colleagues. Just to reiterate a couple of bits, I suppose, and hopefully Trevor can hear okay. In STW, in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, we have built our neighbourhood framework, our neighbourhood geographies, over the PCN boundaries, the primary care network boundaries. And that is utterly deliberate, because they do broadly sit well within our two local authority boundaries, so a place. So as a one system, two places, and then a number of neighbourhoods which are co-located with the PCNs, we give ourselves an opportunity to make sure, and alongside general practice, I would also reiterate, local authority teams are vital in this. So there is a bit here, I know we're perhaps focusing on the health element here, but the wraparound services for residents are general practice and indeed primary care, as well as the local authority service are absolutely pivotal. But then we need to dovetail in, and I suppose the point, Chair, about being perhaps illustrating general practice. You could argue actually every single partner needs to be noted in this, and therefore that they are, and they're represented certainly the place boards. The voluntary community sector, which again are pivotal in a number of different areas. The community trusts, we've got mental partnership in terms of health care, really secondary care input involved, but that might be virtually as well as so I suppose my message is all partners are part and parcel of this. We need to wrap around the correct set of work. And indeed, this is also, as I say, a mechanism for transformation, which I think Jess has planted.
I guess I think I agree with all the comments already said. If you look at the paper already highlighted some of the pieces already spearheading some of these key work, I think the most important point not to note is that general practice remain a primary list holder patients. So a lot of the work that's being pushed forward will be based on population health and also based on the stratification. That has got to come from general practice. So therefore, once you progress into the space of more targeted approach, we're moving away from a reactive care to more proactive care as the beginning part of the system. We all joined up how we then later on, how we work with Unity, how we then later on with POD. So general practice is absolutely taking front and centre role in this, which is the primary aim for the 10 years within the 10-year plan for neighbourhood for managers.
Thanks, Ian.
Walked up the streets of Wellington today, probably most people don't is a neighbourhood. My question is really around the ambition and all, because I look at one of the tables that talks about neighbourhood health, various strands, and it talks about I may be wrong, but I haven't seen a clear timeline as to when we're going to get to this journey. It's sort of who started. And I suppose the question is, when do we foresee we're actually going to get these teams work? And more importantly, the resource shift from the acute side into those communities. Because that's going to be critical to this person. And at the moment, I don't think we're actually articulating that sufficiently to make it real and building up that capacity.
I think that's a really good question. It builds on the question that's been asked several times on GP practice visits and builds on a question earlier on in terms of, so what difference does this make in terms of being in the national programme and also the work that we're doing on neighbourhoods? We had a conversation in the System Transformation Group this morning, that's chaired by Andrew, and I would propose, Roger, that we work on that through that System Transformation Group, because that's what we're committed to do. But we need to bring back a clearer update in terms of what does this mean locally and what does it look like. Going to capture what Jess has talked about, which is there's a lot of work happening already, and that's making a difference, but we're not bringing that, that's not as visible as it could be, as well as then here are the next stages of the neighbourhood work that we also need to progress on, and what difference will that make to our population by when and what that will look like. So I think we need to do both of those bits. I think the System Transformation Group is the right place to do that with the work that Lorna is leading on. But then we need to bring a board update back on that audit. Challenge.
Okay, sorry. I think it's really good. One thing I would ask is that we sort of, in a sub-neighbourhood type way, speak to people in those areas to include those, bring them in. I suppose residents groups are very sort of certain type of person. That's not a negative person, but they're the same sort of person. And so we need a diverse breadth of people, don't we? So what you might get in Woodside, Prisley, different view. So just to really get a good view of people, they're stakeholder, aren't they? So just to make sure they're involved in the neighbourhoods, in the sub-neighbourhoods of where you're doing the work, I think we're really helpful. It gives them a perspective without all the bits we have to think about, and they're quite helpful, aren't they? So I would suggest.
So what I was going to say kind of comes into a bit of that as well. You know, you ask in terms of the neighbourhoods and what's going to be done and when, but actually it kind of has to be driven by the neighbourhood in terms of that need. You know, like I spent an hour doing some filming upstairs talking about Highby and how that was rolled out, and actually that came about from a joint strategic needs assessment from the community. So that gave us the data, the need the community asks and wants. And then from that, then we collaborated together to actually produce something which is on that sub-neighbourhood footprint that actually was driven by the community and involved a lot of community engagement with them, and they came with us and they helped. So it's very difficult to say what works for my neighbourhood might not be the same as for you. You know, I cover a huge area which has got some slightly dense population, but often some massive rural poverty. So the asks and the needs are different, and that's actually the beauty of neighbourhood working, is that nothing's the same. So In terms of what's going to happen when, absolutely, you can say we're going to try and make some progress, but my progress might be different to Ian's, that might be different to Newport's, that could be different to Trade. So there's different needs and wants, but certainly we have to demonstrate that we're doing that. And I think that's the beauty of it. They're not the same.
I think it's just want to emphasise from Jess and Martin it's the real benefit of how we do this personally touch target is we do it really collaboratively. Health have got a really NHS England just very good at giving us a little clear framework and health policy listening to them. So actually we're already doing this across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin anyway, and we take a much broader view of health and wellbeing. And when you look into that community, there'll be a health angle that looks in, and this helps us really get all that, but actually what we're doing is looking into each organisation and saying how do we do it. It's really helpful. And I think there's a lot more, for example, from the local authorities, we were absolutely kind of the social care side of it. There's 18, 20 partners that are going to be involved in this project. It brings that absolute diversity and brings all those together. We can talk about what we're going to do to get people their houses sorted and everything else. It's all kind of a continuum that starts to happen around prevention. So I think the bit for me is we're doing some great work. It's based on evidence, based on need, which is beyond into sub-neighbourhoods. It's how we build up from that, and it's that wider well-being bit, and it's doing it at scale. So we've been saying for a long time, we've been doing this in pockets in a way this is big and much higher profile and allows us to keep everything there right for different lens looking in at the small picture. So
really useful conversation. Thank you. And it sounds as if there's, we're noticing from this board the progress that's being made based upon the framework that we set up some time ago. I think it's about now being in a position to describe the journey and acknowledging that may be different in different parts of the patch, but making sure we've got that narrative flowing inside that. As Roger's point, where's the ambition and where the timeline. So I think Simon, you articulated that very well in terms of how we might bring that back to a future response. The subject to that, we happen to agree the recommendation. Thank you very much. Moving on then to policy oversight of primary care. One more, Vanessa.
Next up, so thank you very much. This paper on primary care quality was requested by the board a few meetings ago, you'll remember, in order to gain a deep understanding of how primary care and quality is overseen, both in the ICB and broader networks. So the report sets out a range of activities and oversight abilities in primary care, and it's very much a partnership with the primary care team, the quality team and the practices themselves, because without getting into those practices and being able to go and visit and talk to the staff there, we wouldn't have an accurate view, and they generously share data with us as well. So the report set shows you had a range of information. We have got a range of dashboards and ways of collecting that information, not necessarily one quality dashboard, which is something that some ICBs have started to look at, but in fairly early stages across all of them really. The challenge there is getting both qualitative and quantitative information in balance, and it's really important we get that qualitative information in there too. So things like the GP patient survey, which actually reflects us in a really good light, is really important in that. The thing I guess that summarises the quality in GP practice is the CQC sections, and as we've heard in for care homes, in which Simon highlighted no inadequate care homes. We also have no inadequate GP surgeries as we speak as well. And on top of that, we've got no inadequate trust either. So we are doing really well from that perspective in driving up quality across the system. CQC are very active at the moment. They have a huge target to achieve by this time next year across all of their inspections. And that is part of the DASH report outcomes, which I mentioned earlier. So working with CQC, ensuring that practices as well as other health and care establishments are open to CQC inspection is really important, and we have multiple outstanding
reports at the moment awaited just because of that huge target the DPC have got to get through, and they've really increased their inspection codes recently. But as we speak, no inadequate, which is absolutely great, and very few positive. And noted to say, that as Vanessa said, we monitor, we collect a huge amount of information from general practice, both positive and quantitative, and it's about the triangulation of that information and making sure that we are understanding, we're not necessarily just conflating access with quality, which is what happens in the headlines, and is a difficult thing to sometimes separate from a patient experience perspective, but making sure that that patient experience is good, that clinical care and outcomes are good, as well as the kind of overarching headlines of the CQC inspection. So we have those conversations on a monthly basis, triangulating all that information together. It then feeds in through both the commissioning group and also through Quality Performance Committee, so it's something that is very much on our radar at all times.
Yes. Just to add, talking of good stuff, general practices being represented at the RCGP conference, so we're presenting the IU workers until the demand for MGT work experience, and we're being represented by the talking person. And the demand for MGT has also been accepted for shortlist for GP awards. It's covered in the so there's some good stuff that's now we're being represented as an ITB in national forums such as the RCGP and the UK Award.
That's really good to hear. Cheryl.
Just a quick query on the CPC inspection. Do the require improvements? It said Q2, they're going to have a visit. Has that happened?
Yeah, I understand they're both in process at the moment, but I could do just to confirm that.
We have a question to we know, well, we've been asked to say that we are continuing to be assured by the progress of primary care quality assurance, not just in terms of the cover report, but also the significant amount of details in the information. Yeah, thank you very much. Moving on then to infrastructure strategy and store approval.
Thank you. And for those that don't know Angela, this is Angela Zartlow, she's my Director of Finance. It would have been very remiss of me to come today to present this and not acknowledge all the hard work that Angela and our system estates lead have put into developing this document. So I'll do a very quick headline introduction and then hand over to Angela just for the key points. This has been a process that's been very similar to us putting together a finance strategy. We've got an ever-changing world that's moving around us in terms of governance and structures and everything else. And we've been asking ourselves, when's the right time to bring this to board? And actually we came to the same conclusion as the finance strategy. The world is going to continue to move around us. So let's get this out there. Let's set that baseline, acknowledging the fact that we may have to revisit some content. Indeed, it may be that some of the responsibilities around the strategy change over time because of the government reform. But actually, we need something that we all collectively recognise as a system that we can work to. And so systems are required to have an infrastructure strategy. It's a really important part of our overarching strategic profile and position. And whilst there's no statutory requirement to publish it, and we want to do that, we want to be transparent about what we're aiming to achieve. The strategy itself sits alongside a 10-year capital expenditure plan, which we signed off a while ago now, and again will be subject to refinement as we learn more about future years' allocations. We've had the support and the strategy itself has been kind of written with NHS Property Services so that we can draw on their expertise around the environment and understanding of the state. And over what feels like quite a long process now, because it's been in development for a while, we've been able to engage with a number of our system partners to make sure that we've got alignment with individual organisation strategies, primary care, estate strategy, and that we make sure that the priorities and areas of focus within the infrastructure strategy fully support and complement our overarching strategy
that describes the care that we want to commission for our patients. And the strategy itself has been through relevant governance, and indeed the Strategic Estates Group and Strategy Intervention Committee earlier this month supported it to be brought here for endorsement and sign off today. And I'm really pleased to say just a little bit of extra governance that sits in here as part of our system improvement plan. This is also one of the other items that evidences our progress towards in our NOF4 criteria. So at that point, I'm going to just hand over to Angela to pick up these key points.
Angela, again, assuming you've read the report, just highlight what's only pertinent.
Thank you. So just a few key headlines from me. The strategy document itself is based on the structure that was recommended by NHS England. So we have followed that format. We have incorporated feedback from the relevant estates leads in our region into the document. We've had the opportunity to ensure that we've got complete alignment of our system partners and the local authority in terms of the content of the document. It has been refreshed for the latest version of the 10-year CAPT plan, following the 25-26 operational plan update. It does reflect the latest priorities for green, workforce and digital, so it is fully aligned to the other strategies. From a guideline perspective, the oversight of delivery of the metrics within the document are overseen by SEG and through the strategic development committee and be reported up through to the board. Just a couple of examples of metrics that we've discussed. So utilisation of clinical space to support neighbourhoods. So we're looking at where those locations are, where we need to look at space sensor in terms of optimising usability space. And we do have a significant amount of critical infrastructure risk and backlog maintenance, which we need to address. That will be subject to national capital funding.
Thank you. A lot of detailed work has gone into this. Thank you very much for that. Comments and questions from the board? Please.
Thank you. That's one detail one I'd like to take forward that seems to make a big impact in terms of some investment from an infrastructure perspective. Council are very committed to significant investment into space, and I really welcome probably looking at it in a slightly different way from a commercial point of view and a long-term point of view, working with the GPs to make a difference. This is our role, and it's really important that there's a significant challenge and something we can make a difference with in that local community.
Thanks, David. I think that's really helpful just to ensure we're having conversations with both local authorities, but also how do we make sure that we are maximising the potential that could come from looking at infrastructure and capital resource impacts for creative and innovative ways. I think this gives us a framework for that. It's got to be aligned to what conversations are taking place within the local authority.
If I may as well, we do have local authority partners stacked on our system of data group. James comes for you, and it's also Dave Bennett, who is chair of that group, which unfortunately can't be here today. But we've got a non-exec lead on that group because we think it's really important to make sure that we've got some power behind this one.
Thank you. Yeah, it made me interesting. I mean, I think it's the first time I've seen a total collection of our total estates. Obviously, the health side. We've talked a lot about one estate in the past and worked with colleagues, but it's the first time I've seen it also. And I think that's really important to have a baseline to know what was not important, what we could make use of, particularly as we start to do differently and really set this about. The one slight caveat I just wanted to bring up, having been part of the sort of information gathering in general practice and in our PCN, it was quite difficult actually to get our practices to take part in this and share the information. They're individual businesses, and they were cautious about sharing this information, some of which can be sort of considered commercially sensitive. We worked through that, with the promise that the information was going to be shared appropriately, and it did become a positive exercise. And I know that some of my practices have seen positive messages of this. I was slightly alarmed to see some of the information that
level that was included in the report here in the profit paper. And no one practices would be concerned to see that. Maybe we can have a discussion exactly which elements I think, like Paul husband said, it needs to be presented slightly in a pot. It's absolutely effective that colleagues here within the organisation are aware of this health planning. But I think that it might make them less keen to engage with the exercise in the future.
Good flags. Yeah. So I think what we're going to ask to do is to approve the infrastructure strategy, acknowledging what the useful comments have been made by our colleagues. But also, I think it's a really important point in terms of how we tie this into broader, wider use of public resource and how might we generate additional, potentially create additional capacity by looking at working more innovatively in partnership. So let's make sure we keep that as a key approach within the recommendation. We happy to agree with that? Great, thank you. And then on to the green plan. I know that there's been a degree of socialisation of the green plan over these months.
Yes, indeed. So it was just to seek board's approval. Tracy, I know it's got a couple of months. I think just to confirm that this is an NHS requirement. We're absolutely working together with them, and actually this version, the updated version, have been has run lots of claims. Tracy, do you want to say that?
Thank you. So I would just start by saying that many of the things that Claire has said around the estate strategy also sound to the green plan in terms of moving fees. So we do have a statutory duty to publish our green plan, our existing green plan. The plan presented to you has been developed alongside provider needs, has consistency in relation to the previous green plan guidance for our use of more sustainable fuels, looking at how we work in partnership with our local authorities around air pollution, travel and transport. The refreshed guidance has new focus on clinical transformation and how we can have a different lens on more sustainable clinical transformation. And it also looks at how we should be as a health service alongside other partners, looking at planning for some of those events that we know will become more frequent as part of the impact of climate change on our environment.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions? Again, there's been a number of conversations before around this. None of this should be continuing to everybody, and really, obviously, really important.
Just to recognise and thank Tracy for leadership in the space. I think the key bit is the bit we've done better at is how does this become business as usual in conversations in other places rather than here's a piece of work that's separate and standalone over here and let's write a strategy about it. And I think if we follow that through into some of the health qualities work, follow that through into green work, follow that through into infrastructure and estates work, that piece of embedding this work in how we do business around here is more likely to get traction and make a difference on the elements. I think it's coming through and takes a big thing.
We approve the green plan. Thank you very much. That's approved. We now have a 10-minute break, so we can come back 5 to 4.